Well, hello there. My name is Void Ghost, and today I would like to answer a question. What question? Well, will mechanization take your job? Now, what is mechanization? Well, in the simplest of term or explanations, it's getting more machines to do the jobs that people do. Now, when did this appear? Um, Well, a long time ago, and we could go back and back in history and find some good examples. But I think one of the biggest ones that kind of changed the world was the invention of what was it called? The cotton gin, I believe. Yes. You see, if you look at the United States in the 18th century, we had, well, slavery there, right? And there was a point where it wasn't really profitable anymore. The upkeep of a slave was basically too much to do anything more than, say, plant tobacco. That was pretty much the only thing done. And what about cotton? Well, cotton wasn't profitable because you had to separate the seeds when picked from the rest, right? The thing you weaved into shirts and all. So a slave then, or a worker, of course, if you would pay him, and he would be free, was able to basically clear about 2 pounds of cotton a day. So that's not much. Actually, that's very little. So cotton wasn't profitable. But then this machine basically made it very profitable because the same guy could clear 50 pounds, so 25 times more. And how did that affect the economy or maybe, the United States? Well, something that is slavery that was about to go suddenly became very profitable. And well, of course, that pushed the southern states to try to keep that potential, that new potential, in their hands and not let go. Now, that may seem like a drastic example, and why did I mention it here exactly? Well, you see, one machine can make the production of certain goods, it can multiply it like that, 25 times more, right? That's one example, just one. And does that mean the people that produced this, that made cotton, for example, or cleared it, suddenly were not needed? On the contrary, because you see, uh, producing much, much more, 25 times more, wasn't a problem. They could sell it. And that meant that the person producing it was actually more valuable now. And this thing is kind of, you can see it through the ages, of course, mostly not on slaves, but you can see, for example, factories getting some specific machines, some production lines set up, and increasing production, but not firing, maybe even hiring a few more people. But there is a limit to this. The limit is how much stuff you can sell. If you can produce more, that's great, but there's a certain point where you're not going to be able to sell more produce. Whatever you're producing, that's it. And that's the moment when people get fired. Because if you can, say, take the factory employing 4,000 people, put in some machines, increase the production 5 times, and then find that, well, yeah, that's great, but you can't sell more than, say, 80% of what you produced, and then the logical step is fire 400 people, decrease the production that way, okay, but you still have much more than before, and you actually have as much as you need. And that is the real problem. And of course, this doesn't happen at once. It happens over some time. So you introduced a few machines here, maybe one there, or maybe you got 20 factories and one is upgraded this way. And yeah, they fire a few people, but it's not like overnight. Half of the factories or all of them get rid of a big portion of their employees. Now, let's look at another example of how you could upgrade production. And this was done at the beginning of the 20th century by a guy called Tyler. You see, he was the person that, well, I wouldn't say he invented production lines, but he was a key member of people that implemented them. So when you have economy books, you're going to have him referenced. And there's a very good example how you can change how something is made and actually increase production. And in this case, Tyler was hired by an owner of a pin factory. So they made pins, right? So there was one guy, okay, each employee cut a piece of wire, stiff wire, then took a tip of the pin, put some glue on the wire, and put the pin together, right? And then he had one pin. Now Tyler just separated that, I think, over 3 or 4 people. So one of those processes, probably gluing, was a bit longer, so it's logical to put 2 people there. And one guy would just cut the wire, cut. Someone else would put glue on these pieces of wire, and then someone would glue the whole thing together. And you know what he discovered? He increased the production 20 times just by doing that. 20 times. Now then you had Henry Ford, for example, and the production of, well, the Ford T. That was the first one mass produced. I think it was the first one, but basically it was a cheap car, and everyone could afford it, right? And if you look closely at the people that made these cars, then you would have someone, for example, just, let's say, putting a screw in a tire, or maybe a set of 4 screws, and then the car would go along, and he would put a set of 4 screws in this one tire, and someone else would just screw them in. Maybe even just one screw at each car, okay? And then the car would go on, and he would screw another screw, and over, okay? So this was a very, I could say, a process that you really wouldn't want to experience. You just do this one thing over and over. But unfortunately, of course, you may have a job where you experience it very well, and over time you get very, very good at it, because this is just one move you do. And sometimes you can see a YouTube video about people who kind of can do something with incredible precision and speed because they do it all the time. This is usually doing something on a production line, for example. Now, so in this case, we see that just by rearranging how things are produced, you can actually decrease the amount of people needed to produce the same amount of stuff, and drastically decrease them, right? Because let's say that amount of pins in that case would be enough right? And the producers would say, oh, I can't sell more. No way. I just need that amount. So what would be the logical conclusion? Well, he would generally fire 95% of the staff, at least those guys, those people producing the pins, right? Because you have administration and etc. But those people would be mostly fired because of the improvement. And over the years, there's another factor, you see. When you look at the democratic countries, the democratic system, it works on a rather simple idea that the production of each country goes up. Now, if it goes up every year, the production capacity, capability, uh, then everything is fine. The country is getting better, it's getting richer. Everybody wants to lend it some money if it wants to, right? Okay. What if that production flatlines? Well, that's a problem. It's like the last breath before you die. People think, oh my goodness, and uh, they think that country is gonna go down. The quality of life in it is gonna collapse. It's gonna get ruined. Now, what if that production capacity would decrease? Ooh, that's even worse. Now, of course, I'm saying production, but it's not just production. You can have services, you can have tourism, all those things kind of add up to what the country can earn, basically. But in some cases, actually producing stuff is the major factor in this equation. And how did countries during the years of the 20th century improve that? Well, they basically introduced more and more machines. They set up production lines. Okay, so they streamlined the production. But then, as I mentioned, you get to that point where you can't actually sell more. So, what do? Well, you can make things cheaper and you can make them so they break on purpose. So, for example, if you have a razor and you shave, then you're going to find out that after the first time you get it wet, it's going to oxidize and it's going to get dull very quickly, right? It's specifically made for to get dull, and so you have to change your shaving machine at least every few days, even if you just get it wet and just leave it there, right? So you clean it off, you just leave it for 5 days, let's say, and then see if it's not a bit dull. Now, maybe now some razor producers know the gig is up and now they're making a bit better razors. I think so, yeah. But this is just one example. If you see an American car, American, Canadian, now I didn't check every possible nation and every possible company, but there's this spot. If you go to the wheels, right, and you get to that part that gets splashed by water when the wheel rolls, then underneath, on the edge of the side of the car, you're going to feel some rough metal. That's not painted metal, okay? And I checked a few new cars like that, and they all had this thing. And then, after you, say, use it for 2-3 years, you get rust. Where did that rust come from? Well, it was slowly eating through from the first time when you splashed water. And when did you splash water? Well, when you drove through a puddle after some rain. Whoosh, and then it starts chewing through your car. And does it destroy your car? Well, no, but you get rust on the side and you think, oh my goodness, I got to change this. I got to get a new car, for example. So you got a ton of goods. I mean, I'm not saying that every possible thing out there is made this way, but it's either made at the very least as cheap as possible, or it's made to break. Now, uh, let me give you another example. How a certain company got to that conclusion that it's better to make things that break, and they were producing cars. I'm not sure at the company right now, but the thing is, there was one specialist, and he checked the situation and decided that there is a possibility to make engine parts that will not wear. They won't break down ever, right? And there were some key parts, and the materials used, if they were proper materials, they would not break. And the company thought about it and said, well, yeah, we're not going to do that. Why? uh, he asked. And this is an authentic thing. This is a real life example, really. I'm not making this up. And they said, well, look, half of our profits is from selling spare parts. If we don't sell those spare parts, we're going to reduce our profits by half. And yeah, that's a simple thing. So that's one of the ways you can you can stuff more things you produce into the environment. And of course, you get a lot of broken and leftover things, right? Like uh, seas full of plastic bottles, plastic cups, everything is covered in plastic now. And it's going to get worse probably. There are some solutions out there, but not important right now, because that's not what we're talking about, really, right? So what else? What other factors do we need to consider to answer that primary question about a person losing their job over mechanization? Well, can you can you have some positives from mechanization and the increasing production value? Well, of course, and it doesn't need to result in people losing their jobs. And of course, there are some products that are top quality, but there are very few in between, and um, they usually cost more, but they are really made to last usually. So if you look at Western Europe and how the population grows, then you will see that it, unfortunately for Germany, France, Great Britain, I think, too, but I know for certain, it's certain that Germany basically started to kind of um, not increase in population and even drop, I think. Um, And what does that mean? Well, it means that year after year, you get fewer people. They pay less taxes because of that, and your country cannot produce as much. And you already said that that is very bad. So how can you kind of do stuff the way you did with a lesser amount of people? Well, you introduce more and more machines, right? So mechanization in this case supplemented the workforce. So the same amount of people not could, of course, do more with the machines, but if you had fewer people, they could still do as much or even more because they had machines. Now, there were, of course, other moves made by certain countries, like inviting a lot of people in. That's one of the methods. It can quickly backfire because you're gonna need more skilled personnel. And that's the next point, or maybe one more thing I'd like to mention, or two things. So, what about other jobs? Because I'm talking about production. What about other jobs like a bartender? Well, there are robots right now playing bartender, because yeah, you could say they're doing the job, but honestly, there's maintenance. So there's the guy who actually has to check them out once in a while and see that they don't malfunction. Uh, they're only present in Las Vegas, I think, in the United States, of course, and they spill. They spill quite a lot of what they're doing, at least as I saw it happen. So they're like this gimmick, but will this actually be something used more and more often? It's possible, and definitely you can see automation in some areas like warehouses. There are fully automated warehouses now. You don't have to have people getting stuff and transporting it somewhere. So this is a simple thing, and to a point, putting a machine and making it do stuff was that would have been extremely expensive, but the costs went down, and they will go even more down and down and down and down, and eventually you will have simple jobs and simple machines that will replace people in those jobs. Now, that doesn't mean everywhere is going to happen. No, a few places here, a few places there. It's going to go on and on, but this process is going to be ongoing. And eventually, another job will totally disappear, and then another job will totally disappear. Now, what about white collar jobs? If you have a lawyer, for example, and maybe you are a lawyer and you might be interested, is there something out there that can do your job? Well, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't put it like that, right? But there are computer systems. Okay, so this isn't really an AI, artificial intelligence, but it's something that mimics some of the functionality. It learns. You can put in knowledge and it can cross-reference those things. So, for example, you can upload many books on law to this machine, and then it can spit out some combination of laws that you should reference in as a lawyer, for example, in the upcoming trial to defend someone, for example, and it's going to go through everything. You're not going to skip something. You're not going to have to spend nights and maybe more even days trying to go through all the books that maybe there was some sort of law that you skipped. It's not going to skip anything. Now, that does not mean that it's going to actually do well in court. Not yet, anyway. But it's going to supplement the knowledge and the thinking process of a lawyer, which means you can have a rather weak lawyer, a lawyer that wouldn't do that well. And this person will have this machine, the program, basically, running and doing stuff for him, thinking of a solution. You could say it's not going to really think about it. It's just going to reference the laws it has with every upgrade. I mean, if there was a law, say, voted in, say, 2 weeks ago, the lawyer may not even know it, might not remember it. Maybe he kind of skipped that little part, and it might be important. The machine will know. The program will know. And it's going to just present the person in charge with its conclusion, then it is going to make things very, very easy and very accessible. All the knowledge, that's there, and you kind of had to previously go through it at least once, and then think, wait, there was a law here, or there was an instant of using this kind of defense somewhere. The machine will help with that incredibly. And it's already happened in a way. At least one law firm employed something that was called an AI, but of course it's not. It's just a program. It's an advanced program. That's it. But pretty much all lawyers probably will have something like that in the near future. Maybe it's already happening on a wider scale than you can think of. Now, what about all other white-collar jobs? Well, the thing is, nowadays, if you have the smartest program, so it's not smart like we might be smart, right? It's going to be good at processing information and reacting to stuff. And you want it to be working in, say, an archive or something, then some of the elements that a person working there would do, it won't be able to do unless you plug in some machines it can control. So there are two components to these advanced systems. One is the software. This is the brain, right? This is the thing that operates there and makes the, let's say, quote unquote, thinking or analyzing. And then you have the machinery that it can move. Now, you probably saw a lot of movies where you have some sort of android, right? Some robot, and it has a robot brain and a program that's running it. And this machine basically is what is operated by the program. So the program could be put in something else and operate something else. Or it can have 20 such machines or 1,000. The capacity, there is some limit, of course, but you can generally have one system running the whole factory, right, with all the machines there. And, well, what does that mean for us humans? Well, yeah, that does mean that there will be less jobs available. But that doesn't mean that it's suddenly going to go from a lot to just no jobs at all. The most affected are going to be those simple things that people without qualifications can do. Of course, that's also, it's kind of questionable if you can implement such thinking or such methods everywhere, because you might have a small city or a village, and buying a machine there or some expensive program to run, and the hardware to put it on, that's just not going to pay for itself, no way. And you can have cheap employees ready available. So it depends. If you have to pay a lot for human help, then if you can replace it with something that, well, doesn't need anything more than maintenance, then you will have a profit. And if that thing is going to be very costly and human labor in this case will be cheap, well, of course, you're not going to do it. So it's not something that, boom, is there, it's going to just wipe out all jobs. But there's something, I would say, creative denial in those that try to explain that, you know what, yeah, but other jobs will appear because that's how it always was. Yes, it was like that when you had only mechanization with machines, not with computer programs, not stuff that enters the white colored area of work. Because when you look at this, this is a new thing. Okay, this is a very, very new thing. And its effects will be massive. Because even if some of those people who spend a lot of money on their education, a lot of time, suddenly find themselves out of the job because, well, a trend like that. That means in the near future, you will have even less of those people working, right? And then even less, which means that this will affect our society one way or another. And, well, as I said, it's a fresh thing, really. The way this effect is happening, how far will it go? All the way, probably, and that means we'll get to this point where things will have to be done. Oh, and just let me give you an example of how um, some people decided to um, keep hopes up. They said, "Yeah, people are losing jobs, but um, look, 6,000 people in the United States found employment recently as rumba teachers, some new dance." Well, that's great, of course, but that's kind of a niche thing, and you can't assume that everyone is going to apply for that. But then there's another thing that is kind of keeping people's hopes up, and that is go into IT. So you becoming a programmer. Now that is of course a good option, but if you hear someone saying that, hey, you know what, just come on, we'll give you a course in IT, and after 6 months you're going to be a programmer, yeah, in one programming language, you're going to know how to do stuff, then they're going to make an upgrade to it and change some stuff. And eventually you're going to find that you're not getting what actually is happening. Why is your uh, program that you wrote half a year ago not working? What's the problem? Because you see, there's a lot of underlying things. And it takes a few years to actually understand them. And you may have enough knowledge to kind of work with something, but then when a problem hits you, you're going to have nowhere to turn and to get answers, because it's not like there's a big book of answers on IT that can explain this. You have to have a lot of knowledge, and you have to expand this knowledge. You have to kind of upgrade yourself in this. And some people may be willing to do it, and some people think that this is like learning any other skill that you can just have and then say, oh, okay, I know it to a degree. Unfortunately, that's not how it is. You're going to have to always expand it, kind of like a doctor, because a doctor, that is a medical professional, right? If he wants to be good, he should kind of look at the latest developments in medicine. And in IT, it's kind of like that. Now, so where does that leave us? If there's not really something you can go into, for example, and think that this is going to be a job that's not going to disappear, and maybe your job is already disappearing, and you're thinking, well, what now? and you look around, and there's not maybe there's not that many other jobs that you like. Maybe they are, right? Okay, it depends on the country and the specific year, the specific region, and your specific set of skills, for example. But the number of jobs will decrease. That is absolutely positive. And those that will appear in their place will not replace the amount that will be lost. More and more jobs will be done, or uh, some functions fulfilled by so-called AIs and machines, basically machines. And what can be done? Well, there's going to probably have to be some sort of change in society, something big. And you don't have to take my word for it. Uh, Even Elon Musk from Tesla and SpaceX, he mentioned at one time that there's going to have to be some sort of basic income for everybody. So you stay at home and do nothing, but you get some money, right? And how would that work? Well, it would really work if globalization goes further, and this will, yes. And you have a lot of countries in this. Well, it's maybe the explanation would take another hour, so I'm not going to put it down here. But a very short thing that I can say about it would be, the bigger the system and the less countries outside of it, the more you can control it and make everybody have a certain amount of income. Okay? If you have a system where people are flooding in from outside, and this system has to interact with other systems, that is, so other sets of countries, for example, that have their own ideas of how things should be done, then there's always going to be a problem. And at some point, the country or the set of countries that do well or better than the others will get a lot of people coming in there, but not necessarily because they want to work there, but they want some of that money that's there. So as you see, the solution for this, I guess we'll see what's going to come out of all this mechanization. But the mechanization is gonna it's gonna increase, right? And you're gonna feel it. Hopefully, you're gonna feel it in a good way. It's gonna help you in your life. And if you actually get people in charge that maybe think this through and won't just go the way of denial, then who knows? Who knows? Maybe it's going to be all for the better. And in 10, 20 years, we're going to have a great world where perhaps you can work less and somehow survive and thrive even, right? Well, I guess we'll see. Anyway, I'm Void Ghost, and if you liked it, like it, and thank you for watching.